Yo, oh my goodness. My life is making so much sense. For real though. Yo, this is Uncle Corey Johnson back here with another video. Out here trying to get 3 degrees buffer. You know what I'm saying? I hope you like the content because this stuff has been mind blowing to me. Hopefully you're able to learn a little something too and appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? But honestly, today's class, this is Monday, just getting back over the weekend. And man, I tell you, today's class was an absolute banger. I'm sitting there, my mind is getting blown. I'm just learning so much stuff that's making everything that I've been through, at least growing up in my experience early on with Adventism and Christianity, make so much sense. So I'm gonna start by telling you about this story. I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before on this channel, but man, it was back in my mind big time today. So I remember growing up in church, we had this big initiative this one time, this evangelism opportunity outreach. My church is in Virginia, mind you, and we found out that there was this event called World Catholic Youth Day that was going to be happening in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Now, I'm not sure how long of a drive that is. In fact, let me look that up real quick. Let's give some more context to this story. You know what I'm saying? All right, maps. How far is Stanton, Virginia from Toronto, Canada? Great day. 539 miles or 867 kilometers for you Canadians out here, or non-Americans, because that's what the world is on. How many hours though? 10 hours and 22 minutes. Okay, so this is a trip. We're going so far out of the way to do this World Youth Day. And let me find out what year this was, just to give y'all even more context. Let's see. Toronto. Okay, here it is. Wow. In a month, it would be, dang, 21 years since I was there? Is that? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's crazy. All right, so it was the 17th World Youth Day, all right? In 2002, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This was a Catholic Youth Festival held July 23 to the 28th, and our church was on a mission, all right? Ooh, we were on a mission. We had these little pamphlets, these little books called Beware the Protestants. I wonder, you know what? Let me look these up and see if they still exist. All right, whatever. So I couldn't find it. But anyways, we had these books called Beware the Protestants. And just by this name, you can imagine we're going into this Catholic event. A book called Beware the Protestants seems like something all the Catholics would definitely be interested in. But the problem was we were going in like we were on some, it felt like we were supposed to be some stealth agents out here with these books. I must have been early teens, 2002. Yeah, that's like beginning of high school for me. And it just felt off, man. I'm looking around at all these people that I've been told because of what our church taught, you know, 666 and Mark of the Beast, and oh, these people are the enemy and you can't associate with them and all this kind of stuff. And yet we're here, we're in the mix, we're in the belly of the beast, you know what I'm saying? Trying to get these books out. And I remember one being scared out of my pants. I didn't poop myself or anything, so don't worry about that. But I remember being scared just looking at all these people thinking, oh man, these people are, and I had this preconceived idea. I didn't even see them as people because of what I had been taught and the way that I'd grown up. I didn't see it as us trying to minister to them or to reach them with something necessarily positive. It was just, oh, we're trying to sneak this stuff in here. Yeah, the title was Beware the Protestants, but it was clearly a book that was advocating for Protestant and actually against Catholicism. So irony above all ironies, I remember walking out of the campsite after one of the days to see, it felt like hundreds of these books that we'd been giving out in the trash cans, these big trash cans that were around the edges of wherever we passed I think the coolest thing, and maybe the only value I got from that experience, was seeing the Pope. I actually saw Pope John Paul II, actually, during that time, getting into a helicopter. That's the only cool thing about that entire experience for me. But in terms of being an Adventist and being a Christian there, didn't feel right, and I was not a fan whatsoever. Fast forward now to being in class here, trying to get 3 degrees buffer, learning more about the history of missions, and my goodness, there were so many things. Another video is going to have to be on the idea of colonialism and how it overlaps with mission throughout history, 19th century and earlier. That's definitely going to be, I got to come back to that. But to stay on this point here, we're looking at the mission of the Adventist Church, the Seventh-day Adventist Christian Church, right? And when you look at it, it's just interesting because what it emphasizes is the last day events, the 3 angels' messages, the end of time, Jesus is coming soon. And do I believe all of that? Yes, I do. If you ask me personally, I believe that the Adventist system of truth is the most complete system of truth out of all the systems of truth that there are. This is not to say that everyone else's beliefs are wrong, because I think there's a lot of truth in a lot of other belief systems out there. But if you're asking me which one I think is the most complete, I'm going to say Adventism is. That's why I subscribe to it. People who subscribe to Islam believe that theirs is the most complete too. No argument there, all right? To each his own. But the problem is that when you look at the mission statement for Adventism, it focuses on all of these things, right? So as I'm looking through these quotes and these statements and the things that are on the Adventist website, we're going through class today, it's striking me in class, the biggest issue that I had growing up as a young person in the Adventist church was that I never got to know Jesus. Now you might think, well, how is that possible? But the thing was, everything about Adventism was geared through the lens of present truth, end times, and all this kind of stuff. Go ye therefore was only used in the sense of the 3 angels' messages in the last gospel to the end of the world and all that kind of stuff. It was based on the assumption that I already got to know Jesus. And the irony of this is, in the book of Revelation, it talks about the everlasting gospel to bring to all the world, right? And our professor's like, it's funny because we end up going out to talk about the everlasting gospel without talking about the actual gospel. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the story of Jesus, someone who came down here to be God with us because he loves us, to show us who the Father really is. And we lose that very quickly when it comes to end time events, 3 angels' messages, doom and gloom and destruction and judgment and apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very big irony that the everlasting gospel doesn't end up talking much about the actual gospel. So what am I saying? It's like when we go out under this idea of mission and vision that we're currently embracing as a church, there's a false assumption that everyone else has already gotten to know who Jesus is and that everyone else cares about who Jesus is. When, let's be honest, the majority of the world may not know and maybe does not care. And then when I come in with the assumption that they have already done it and judging them based on this new set of beliefs and standards, they're like, what the heck am I supposed to do with that? It doesn't surprise me why the reaction of people is the way that it is to such an arrogant approach. Mind you, I'm calling my own belief system to a degree arrogant. I'm owning that. I'm owning that on behalf of my belief system. Is that my way of doing it? No, clearly it's not, because growing up in that kind of system actually pushed me away from the church and away from Adventism and Christianity to where I didn't want to identify with God at all. And even more irony is that it took actually serving other people and thinking about ministering to other people, that experience and being immersed in another culture, that's what made me see the value in what I believe is real Adventism and what I believe God is really about. So it's interesting. It's a strong statement to say, but what I said in class, I'll say it here again on camera. Adventist mission, the way that we have it described right now, is completely irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant to anybody who does not already believe in Jesus. All right? And that eliminates a whole lot of people. I can't go talking doom and gloom and destruction and all this stuff and repent when people don't even know about the hope and the love of Jesus. I got to flip that. It's like saying, what's a good example? I don't know. You could almost, anything where there's a step one and a step two, and you're trying to tell someone the importance of the second step, and you're assuming that they already know step one. It's like, that's what Adventism has done in large part, and is kind of missing the boat on. We cannot assume anything. You know what they say about assuming, right? Makes an ass out of you and me. And, even though we talked about that book, Spirituality for Badasses, and we're not trying to be just an ass. There's a difference. There's a difference. Be a badass if you want to, but don't be an ass, okay? Don't be an ass. Don't do it. So ultimately the question is, where's the focus? Because if I'm subscribing to something that's making this assumption, well, I guess that's why a lot of people think that Christians are asses. I could keep going on that, but oh my goodness, that's pretty funny. Where's the focus? All right. If we're sticking to this second step and jumping ahead of the game, and we're claiming the everlasting gospel is all of this, and we're missing the gospel, there's no way you're going to reach anybody in a positive sense. A couple things happen. It ends up being a task-based thing that you're trying to do. And now when people reject the end-time message and the present truth, you condemn them like, oh, well, I tried to bring you the message of destruction and you rejected it, so you're going to hell anyways. That's what it ends up doing. And it ends up making even more of a barrier between believers and non-believers. And it's justified, because Christians shouldn't be approaching other people with the idea of, oh, well, you're going to hell if you don't believe in what I have to say. But when I look at my message strictly in the context of judgment, investigative judgment, it's very hard to come up with a conclusion that's different than that, right? But if I instead approach people and say, you know what, I'm going to mingle with you and desire your good. I'm going to learn your culture, your environment, and I'm just going to be with you here and reflect the principles that I've learned about Jesus as he came down here to be God with us. How much more impactful do you think that would be for someone to just live with them and be the best person you can to them? Don't you think they'd start wondering how come you're so kind and adaptable and why you care about them so much, as opposed to just coming in first and saying you need to accept this or you're going to hell? It seems like such a no-brainer, but a lot of religion has actually skipped the first part and assumed that everyone's already on board with that, and then gone with the second part. And you can't make that assumption. Like I said, you can't make that assumption. I found it really interesting growing up. A lot of the people that I would talk to, we have a prophet within Adventist belief, Ellen White, and I think she's legit. A lot of people argue with how legit and whatever. To each their own, all right? I think she was legit. But to me, and you notice from my other videos on this channel, my favorite book of hers is a book called Steps to Christ, which I believe encapsulates the gospel perfectly. What it means to be in a relationship with Christ, to get to know Jesus. Because nothing else within Christianity matters if you don't have Christ. You don't have Christianity without Christ. And yet, that's what we try to do. But that's neither here nor there. You get what I'm saying, right? Ellen White wrote a lot of books. In fact, she's the most widely published and translated female author in history. That's pretty amazing. But when you go and you have discussions with Adventists in particular about different topics and their different perspectives and beliefs on things, you don't hear them quoting Steps to Christ. They quote all the things about prophecy, end times, present truth, all the other stuff, right? But when it comes to Steps to Christ, that book is nowhere to be found. That's the everlasting gospel without the gospel. And you can't have that. Otherwise, you can't hope to make any positive impact on anyone. But that's what we do. We gotta kind of scrap that mode of doing things and just try to be good people to other people. I'll sum it up with this because I think you get the point. When you look at the world today and people, their perspectives and how things are changing, it's very much a thing like this, and people don't want to understand the common ground. But there's also very kind of militant viewpoints where you can't afford to view someone else as another person. So because someone believes this, or because they're on this side of the aisle, you have to view them as your enemy, and you can't relate to them. Otherwise, you're cheapening your stance on who you are. I think that's completely backwards. And the same thing that we see in the real world, we see within religion and spiritual discussions as well. But I think the solution that we would need in the spiritual areas are the same that we would need in the real world. Can I view someone else as a person? And can I operate and honestly act in a way that shows them that I care about their good and their best good, regardless of what that might look like, and understand that that might be different than me? Can I live in a way that respects their culture, their opinions, their views, their perspectives, while still being true to myself and who I believe in? If I can do that, I think I can make a much better impact and be a net positive for society, as opposed to going around condemning everyone, acting like what I believe is better than anybody else, and ultimately being an ass to everybody because they don't want to accept what I believe. That line, I'll never forget this. You can't share the everlasting gospel without the gospel. That's deep. And the real good news to me is that Jesus came to die for us because he cared about us. Not because he wanted us to accept a certain thing, or because we would all go to hell if we didn't accept. He came down here to die for us in spite of all of that. That is good news. That is the gospel. And that is the truth that is everlasting. And anytime that we talk about truth and gospel and everlasting, without that, we're missing the point. So I'll leave y'all with that. Many more mind-blowing things from today. I'm going to go eat first, and then I'm going to get back to this because there's so much to talk about. But we out here taking a step ahead. The 3 degrees buffer. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.